Hey there, welcome to Selenium WebDriver tutorial by Simplilearn. My name is Anagha and today in this video we'll be talking about the Selenium WebDriver basics. What is that you should be expecting from this video? Let's see what is Selenium. Whenever we are learning about any tool, it's good to know a little bit brief history of it. So we will look into how Selenium has evolved over years to become the most popular web application automation tool and why use WebDriver. And then we will understand what is Selenium driver. While we learn this, I will also be touching upon some drawbacks of manual testing and how automation helps. And then a deep dive into architecture of WebDriver. As you know, every automation tool has its own advantages and limitations. So we will be understanding the limitations of Selenium WebDriver and how we work around this. And then I will demonstrate the WebDriver in action, for which I will use a simple web application use case to automate. So let's get started. So before we talk about Selenium, let's understand a few drawbacks of manual testing. Let's take an example of a very simple use case. As a user, I want to log in to my web application using username and password. A very simple use case, and it's a very common use case for any kind of web application you're working. So as a tester, what do? I need to write multiple test cases to test this use case. So I can use multiple data sets like valid credentials, invalid credentials, null values, and so on to test this particular use case. And then what you do, you start executing the test cases one by one. You find bugs, then your developers fixes them, and then you will need to rerun all the test cases again and again until all the bugs for this use case are fixed and your application is ready to ship. Now look into this. Now this brings us to the first demerit of the manual testing, which is what? If one has to run test cases with 100 transactions and repeat them again and again, this is going to be a very time consuming process and very boring. Also, it is more error prone since it's done manually and human mistakes are bound to happen. The third challenge is the scope of manual testing itself is very limited. For example, say regression testing. Ideally, you would want to run all the test cases which you have written, but since it's a manual process, this is going to be very tedious to do. And also, you would not have all the luxury of time to execute all test cases. So what do? You start picking up those test cases which are very important to be run. And that way, you are kind of limiting the scope of your testing. Also, working with large amount of data manually is going to be impractical. What about performance testing? You want to collect metrics on various performance measures as a part of your performance testing. You want to simulate multiple loads on your application under test, and all these things manually it is very difficult to perform and it's not feasible also. And to submit all this, creating manual test reports after running all the tests. Who wants to really do that? And again, another level of challenge here is, say if you're working on an agile model where code is being churned out by developers, the testers are building their test cases, executing them as and when the builds are available to them. This happens iteratively, and hence you will need to run all those test cases which you have written multiple times during your development cycle. And doing this manually definitely is going to be very tedious and boring. And is this the effective of doing it? No. So what do? We automate it. So this tells us why we want to automate. 1, for faster execution. 2, to be less error prone. 3, to help frequent execution of our tests. So there were many tools available in the market for automation. One such tool was Selenium, and that brings us to the slide, Advent of Selenium. So much before Selenium, there were various tools in the market like RFT, QTP, just to name a few popular ones. So Selenium was introduced by a gentleman called Jason Huggins way back in 2004. He was an engineer at ThoughtWorks. He was kind of working on a web application which needed frequent testing, and he realized the inefficiency in doing manual testing of his application repeatedly. So what he did was he wrote a JavaScript program that automatically controlled the browser actions, and then he named that as JavaScript Test Runner. He made this open source, which was later renamed as Selenium Core, and this is how the Selenium came into existence. So with this brief history of Selenium, let's understand what is Selenium and what are its main features. Selenium is the most popular and widely used automation tool for automating web applications. It enables us to test web application on different kind of browsers like Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera, and so on. And also they introduced support for Edge browser after Microsoft introduced it. Selenium is a set of tools and libraries to facilitate automation of web application. It is not a single tool. It has multiple components, and those we will be seeing in some time. All these tools together help us test the web application. So Selenium is open source and it is platform independent. This is the biggest reason why people are preferring this tool, because it is free of cost. QTP and RFT, which I just talked about, are a chargeable one. Selenium scripts can run on any platform because Selenium is primarily developed in JavaScript. So it is platform independent. Well, as you know, it's common for manual testers not to have in-depth programming background. So Selenium has a record and replay back tool called the Selenium IDE, which can be used to create a set of actions as a script and to replay that script. But this is mainly used for demo purpose. Why? Because Selenium is such a powerful tool that you should be able to take advantage of all its features and not just be with a record and replay tool, right? So that way there are a lot of record and replay tool anyway available in the market. The Selenium provides support for different programming language: Java, Python, C#, Ruby, PHP, and so on. You can write your test scripts in any language you prefer or you like. And again, as I said, one need not really know in-depth or advanced knowledge of these languages. You would still be able to write the Selenium scripts with a basic knowledge of this programming language. And also Selenium supports various operating systems. You can run Selenium test on Windows, Mac, or Linux, or even say if you have a Ubuntu machine, you can always run your Selenium test on Ubuntu machines. So you can run the test on any platform of your choice. Okay, so let's go now a little more deeper into Selenium. So I said that Selenium is not a single tool, but it is a suite of tools, right? So now let's look at what are those major components which comprises of the Selenium suite. First one is the Selenium IDE. So Selenium IDE is the most simplest tool in the whole suite of the Selenium. It is nothing but it's an integrated development environment. Earlier, this IDE was simply a Firefox extension and it offered a record and playback functionality. It was a very simple and easy to use. And as I said, mainly this is used for prototyping or for only the demo purposes, right? And not creating automation for your real-time projects because you know of its own limitation of being a simple record and replay tool. However, Selenium, what happened? Selenium IDE, it died with Firefox 55. So that means the support for IDE was stopped from Firefox 55 version. But the good news is very recently brand new Selenium IDE has been launched. And also what they have done is they have made this cross browser. That means you can install the extension on Chrome, the IDE extension on Chrome, or as an add-on on Firefox. So it is supported on both the browsers, Firefox and Chrome. Alright, so while we are talking of this IDE, let me also show you how the latest IDE on the Chrome looks. Okay, for that, let me go and launch my Chrome browser. So let me just open a new tab, and what I'll do is I'll search for Selenium IDE for Chrome download. Then I go to this website, and then you can see here Selenium IDE offered by seleniumhq.org. So what I simply need to do is, like you install any extension on your Chrome browsers, I just say add to Chrome, and this adds this extension on your Chrome browser. Now it has added. So Selenium IDE has been added to Chrome. Use this extension by clicking this icon. So can you see this icon here, which is Selenium IDE? That's it. So once you have installed this, you are free to start using the IDE on this Chrome browser. Similarly, you can do adding of this add-on, which is called as add-on on Firefox. So go to the Firefox browser, search for the Selenium IDE and just install that add-on. So let's get back to our presentation. So that's about the IDE. So what's our next component? Our next component is Selenium RC, which is nothing but Selenium Remote Control. Selenium RC is used to write web application tests in different programming languages. It interacts with the browser with the help of RC server. It has an RC server through which only it can interact with the web browsers. And how does it communicate? It uses a simple HTTP GET and POST request. And this is what was called as Selenium 1.0 version. But it got deprecated in 2.0 version and it was completely removed in 3.0 and was replaced with something called as WebDriver. So we will be talking in detail about why this happened, what were the drawbacks of RC which led to replacing with the WebDriver. So now that brings us to the third component, which is the Selenium WebDriver. This is the most important component. It is just a programming interface to create and execute our test cases. Of course, it's a successor of RC because there were certain drawbacks which I just mentioned, and we will be going in detail of what it were. So WebDriver, what the major difference what we see with the WebDriver is the architecture of the WebDriver is much simpler than RC for the reason that WebDriver interacts with the browser directly, unlike your RC where it needs an RC server to interact with the browser. So this gave a lot of advantage and edge over the RC. The fourth component, Selenium Grid. Selenium Grid is used to run multiple test scripts on multiple machines at the same time. With Selenium driver, you can only do the sequential execution. However, in real-time environment, you know that there is always a need to run tests on distributed environment. For example, say you have a web application and say you have automated around hundreds or thousands of test cases and you need to run them as a regression suite. And also one of the asks is that you need to run this on multiple browsers and multiple OS. Why? Since you have automated them and your application supports multiple browsers and OS. Now imagine the time taken to run these 1,000 test cases sequentially with the WebDriver. Right? It's going to take quite a bit of time. So what you need is to run this parallel on multiple machines, matrixed across the browsers and operating system. And that is where the grid helps you in achieving that. So grid has this hub and node concept and it helps in achieving the parallel execution which I just talked about. So you can check out our detailed video on Selenium grid on Simplilearn. Alright, so now we talked about the components of the Selenium. So let's look at the different versions it evolved into. So when I talked about RC, I mentioned that this was Selenium 1 version. So now let's understand how this evolved over years and what it offers today. So when Jason Huggins introduced Selenium, the tool was called JavaScript program. He called it as JavaScript test runner. It had one major issue. Now that is something called as same origin policy. So what is the same origin policy? It says that a JavaScript, when executed in a domain, can access web pages in that domain only, and it cannot access any web pages in another domain. I will repeat it. Same origin policies dictates that a JavaScript is executed in a domain can access web pages in that domain only, and it cannot access web pages in another domain. For example, say every web page in say google.com domain like search, email, drive can be accessible, but nothing outside of google.com, like say if you want to access a web page in say Amazon or Yahoo, is possible to access. Why? Because of the simple reason, which is a security reasons. Now to overcome this, Paul Homan created something called a Selenium remote control server. And why did he create that? He wanted to trick the browser in believing that the Selenium core through which you're going to run your scripts and your web application under test are in the same domain, with which you are able to run your test on your web application without having to get into this issue of same origin policy. So this is what was the version 1 of Selenium, and we called it as Selenium remote control. And then what happened in 2007, Simon Stewart, he invented this WebDriver. Now why did he invent this? Because the architecture of Selenium RC was little complicated. RC required a separate server to talk to your browsers. So what he did was he removed the requirement of having a separate server in the RC, and this was the Selenium 2 version. Now since it was a transition phase, both the Selenium RC and the WebDriver coexisted in Selenium 2, while the WebDriver was still under development. And then what happened in 3.0 Selenium is the Selenium core, which is the RC, was completely deprecated and only the WebDriver was made available. So in this series of videos, we will be working with Selenium 3.0. And now Selenium 4 is already around the corner. So alpha is already released as of the day when this video was made, and I believe some of the features what the Selenium 4 is going to offer is they are moving towards W3C WebDriver standardization 1, and also there is going to be an improved IDE, the IDE which I just talked about, that it's a improved version of the previous IDE, and then an improved version of Selenium grid also. So they might be doing a GUI based grid, right? So these are some of the major features expected in this version. Why Selenium WebDriver? So let's look at what led to replacement of Selenium RC with this WebDriver. For that, first we need to understand the Selenium RC and its shortcomings. As I said, Selenium RC is a simple tool to write tests for web applications in various supported programming languages like Java, Python, Ruby, and C#. And this is the architecture of the Selenium RC at a very high level. First, you need to write test scripts in any of the supported languages of your choice. So if you're more familiar with Java, you would be writing your test scripts, all your commands in the Java language. So before we start writing the test, one of the major required for the RC to run is your RC server. So first you need to start this RC server before you run even a single line of code. And this RC server is a separate application. And now what is the function of this RC server? This Selenium server or the RC server is responsible for receiving Selenium commands from your test script. It interprets them and then reports the result back to your Selenium test script. Now, what are the Selenium commands? These commands are nothing but the commands written in your test script. These are called as Selenium command. That is what the Selenium server does. Now, after the Selenium server's function, let's look at how the browser interaction happens. The browser interaction happens through this RC server. This RC server uses a simple HTTP post and get request to communicate. And how does this communication happen? This RC server acts like a proxy. Say for example, your test scripts asks for launching a browser. This command from your test script goes to the server, and then this RC server launches the browser, injects its JavaScript into the browser. Once this is done, all the subsequent calls, that is all the subsequent calls is all the rest of the commands which you have written after launching the browser, go to this RC server and then to the actual web server. So it routes, all the commands are getting routed through your RC server to your web browser. Upon receiving this instruction, so what does the code do? It executes these commands as the JavaScript commands on your browser. So once these are executed, the response from the browser or the results, what you say, are sent back to the RC server, and RC server is responsible for sending it back to your test script. And then the test results are displayed here. Now, if you see this complete cycle from starting your command from your test script, talking to the RC server, then RC server talks to the web browser, it injects the JavaScript here, runs your command, takes back the results, sends it to RC server, and then back to this test script. This whole cycle gets repeated for every command which is written in your test script. And this is how your test case gets executed. Alright. So now everything is fine. So great. We are enabled to run the scripts. We are able to launch the browser. We are able to execute all the commands. So what was the problem here? Why was still RC not good enough? For the reason why the RC was still not good enough was, one, the architecture of RC is very complicated because of that intermediate RC server to communicate with the browser. So there is no direct interaction with the browser. This RC server needs to be installed before running any test scripts. That means it has an additional setup, because that is RC server is a mediator between your Selenium commands and your browser. The execution of the commands takes very long time. It is very slow. Why? Because we saw that every command written in your test scripts needs to make a full trip from your test script to the RC server, to the core, to the browser, and then back, which makes your overall automation test execution very slow. So how does Selenium WebDriver now overcomes this? This is a simple architecture of Selenium WebDriver. Even in WebDriver, we have test scripts. We have a web browser and a web server. However, we do not have an additional server for communication like the RC server which we saw in the Selenium RC. This makes the architecture of WebDriver very simple. The Selenium WebDriver, that's one of the biggest advantages. The Selenium WebDriver does not use an additional server. Then secondly, it makes direct calls to your browser using your browser's native support automation. So since there is no intermediate server there, the browser is controlled directly from the operating system level itself. Now due to this direct communication, the trips what we saw from the RC server to the browser and from the browser back to the RC server and to the test scripts, right? This was an indirect communication. Since this whole thing was avoided, the speed of test execution is much faster in RC. And this overall architecture of the WebDriver, if you see, is much simpler than what the RC provides. So this was the major drawback from the RC, and this is where WebDriver replaced RC. Now, was that all because of the architecture? No, there were few other shortcomings with the RC. APIs in Selenium RC. A single function has several commands. Redundant and confusing APIs. RC is less object-oriented API. Though there are good set of APIs to work with, they are pretty redundant and confusing. For example, how and when to use a type key or a type command. Another example is the mouse commands. Click or to use click at, or when to use mouse at or mouse down. So this was getting pretty confusing for the developers. And to top it all this, every browser interprets the command differently, which makes your test cases brittle when it has to work on the multiple browsers. Developers had a tough time making their scripts cross-browser, and they had to add browser-specific code. Whereas Selenium Driver comes with a set of more matured and simpler APIs which are pretty straightforward to use. For example, a simple click to simulate a click action on any web element. Send keys, which simply means send the text to any web element on your web page. Scroll up or down on the web page, and so on. So we will see more of these commands when we actually start working with the WebDriver. Another difference is the browser support. Though both RC and WebDriver supports multiple browsers, RC does not have support for HTML unit, which is a headless browser, whereas the WebDriver supports testing on headless browser. Now, what is this headless browser? Headless browser is a browser which does not have a UI. It makes testing much faster because it does not need a real browser for testing. Now, to summarize all this, so if you look at the RC and the WebDriver comparison, which we talked about, RC is a complex architecture, whereas WebDriver has a simple architecture, for the main reason that WebDriver removed the need of having an intermediate server. RC, the execution of your test cases or your automation scripts, it's much slower than the WebDriver. RC requires a RC server to interact with the browser, whereas the Selenium WebDriver interacts with the browser directly using the WebDrivers. Also, we saw the APIs which RC provides, which are pretty confusing, and WebDrivers, we have much easier and easy to use APIs. No support for HTML unit browser, which is a headless browser. Selenium WebDriver also provides support for HTML unit browser. Now that we have understood what Selenium RC is and why WebDriver replaced RC, let's go another level deeper into WebDriver. So what is Selenium WebDriver? We know that the WebDriver in its simplest term is a tool or a programming interface to create and execute test cases on a web application. It supports multiple browsers, i.e. Firefox, Chrome, Opera, Safari, Edge, and it also has support for headless browser. So we will know in some time what is a headless browser. Some of the features of WebDriver. So while RC was introduced in 2004, WebDriver got introduced by Simon Stewart in 2006. WebDriver can run on any platform of your choice, Linux, Windows, Mac, and even if you have a Ubuntu machine, you can run your Selenium WebDriver. And what is this actual WebDriver? Is it an IDE? No, it is simply a programming interface to run your test cases. And how does it work? The test cases are created and executed using web elements or the objects using web locators and WebDriver methods. So once we get into the demo or once you start understanding how Selenium works, you will understand what are these WebDriver methods and the locating techniques which are used to perform these actions on web element. Selenium WebDriver is pretty fast. Why? Since the WebDriver interacts directly with the browser and does not have an intermediate server like RC. Each browser with which you want to work with has its own driver on which your application runs. And this driver is responsible to make the browser understand the command which are being passed from your script, like a click of button or entering some text in any of the input fields. Through your scripts, you tell which browser you want to work with. Say you want to do all this action, say on the Chrome browser. If you want to work with Chrome browser, then the Chrome driver is responsible for interpreting your instructions from your test case and executing them on the web application, which is launched on Chrome browser only. So like RC, WebDriver also supports multi-programming languages in which you can write your test scripts, like the ones which are listed here. Also, WebDriver supports different frameworks like TestNG, JUnit, and NUnit. When we talk about the limitations of WebDriver, you will appreciate how this support for various frameworks and tools help in making the Selenium a complete automation solution for web application. Now let's try to know what is the architecture of Selenium WebDriver. WebDriver has 4 different components in it. One, we have the client libraries, or what is also called as language binding. Since I said Selenium supports multiple languages and you're free to use any of the supported languages to create your automation script, there are libraries available on Selenium website which you need to download and use them. So Selenium provides a lot of APIs for us to interact with the browsers. And when we do the demo, I will be showing some of those APIs. Now, what are these APIs? These APIs are the REST APIs. REST is representational stateful APIs, and everything for Selenium happens through this REST calls. The second component is the JSON wire protocol. So what is JSON? JavaScript object notation, and it's a standard for exchanging data over the web. So for example, you want to launch a web application through your script. So what Selenium does is it creates a JSON payload and posts the request to the browser driver, right? And where are these browser drivers? These are here. Right? And what are these browser drivers? These are a driver specific to each browser. So if you see here, you can see drivers for Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Safari, and Edge, right? So we interact with the actual browsers here using these drivers. And how does this happen? This driver establishes connection with the real browser without revealing the internal logic of browser functionality. Right? That's exactly the function of this browser driver. Now, what does that mean? Let's say we want to execute a test script. So what happens when the script is executed is an HTTP request is generated and sent to browser driver for each command in the script. And then the driver receives the request through this HTTP server and does all the execution on the actual browser. Once the execution is done, the execution results are just sent back over the same HTTP server to your test scripts. So this is the simplest form of the architecture of the Selenium WebDriver. Well, now as every tool has its own advantages and its limitations, so let's look at what Selenium WebDriver limitations are. Cannot test mobile applications, requires framework like APM. Selenium is for automating web application. It cannot handle mobile. Right? Mobile applications are different and they have its own set of automation tools. However, what Selenium provides is the support for integrating this APM tool. APM tool is one of the popular tool for mobile application automation, right? So it provides a support for integrating APM tool. So using APM and Selenium, you can still achieve mobile application automation. Now, when do you usually use this? In cases where, say, your application under test is also supported on mobile devices. So that means you need a mechanism to run your test cases on your web browser as well as your mobile browsers, right? And this is how you achieve it using Selenium. When we talked about components of Selenium, I said that the WebDriver can achieve only sequential execution. But in real time, we know that we just cannot live with this. We need to have a parallel execution on multiple machines and on multiple browsers. So this limitation of WebDriver is replaced by having the grid, which helps us in achieve the parallel execution. And do check out our video on more details on Selenium Grid. Selenium WebDriver has limited reporting capability. It can help create basic reports, but definitely we need more, especially when we are working on a big project. We need good reports to be created. So what it does is we have a support for multiple tools like TestNG, ReportNG, and even the extent reports, which you can integrate with Selenium and generate beautiful reports. Isn't it really powerful? Alright, there's another challenge what we have. These are amongst few of the challenges what I have put across here. There are other challenges also, but always there is a workaround to get through those challenges. So another challenge which we have mentioned here is Selenium is not very good with image testing, especially designed for web application automation. But then we have other tools which can be used along with Selenium to achieve any kind of image testing you want to do, like AutoIt and Seculi. So same way, the way it provides a mechanism to integrate APM, so Selenium also provides a way for integrating AutoIt and the Seculi tools. So if you look at all this, Selenium still provides a complete solution for our automation need. And that's the beauty of Selenium that makes it most powerful tool today for automation. Okay, so let's look at WebDriver in action. So before we do that, let's understand some of the basic browser commands and functions that we will be using in our demo today. The get commands. So there are 6 get commands to perform various actions on the browser. Driver.get. This is used to launch any website application. It takes a string argument and this needs to be a fully formed URL which you want to launch. Driver.getTitle. So this method fetches the title of the web page which you're working with. So for example, let's go to eBay. So if you just hover your mouse here, can you see the text there? Electronics, cars, fashion, collectibles, coupons and more, eBay. So this is nothing but title of this current page. And this command helps us to get the title. Get current URL. So to get the URL of any page is when you want to use this command. So this will be used especially when you're working with multiple web pages and you want to say print whatever the current URL you're working on the console. Get page source. This method dumps the complete HTML page source on your console. Actually, this is not really much used unless you really need to look at anything in your HTML pages. And then there are 2 more get commands related to Windows handles. These are used for handling multiple tabs and multiple windows on the browser. Now, we will not be dealing with this in today's demo. However, if you want to know the details of this command, these are available in our video tutorials for these commands. The next set of commands are the navigational commands. So these are self-explanatory and basically are used to navigate between the multiple pages of your web application. The first one, the driver.navigate.to, is very similar to driver.get. So both does the same function. And then you have navigate.back, navigate.forward and navigate.refresh. So this is used for refreshing your browser page. And then there are two commands, browser commands, which we use. One is the driver.close. So this closes the current browser window. So if you have got multiple tabs open in the window and you want to close a particular tab, so that is when you use driver.close. And driver.quit, what it does, it quits the entire browser session. Then there are few other commands, and some of the commands are listed here. However, if you see, there is a huge list of commands available in Selenium, and since we'll be using just a few of them in today's demo, I have listed here. So let's just understand these very basic commands which we will be using. Driver.findElement. Now, when you want to work with any application, what is that you need to do? You need to perform actions on the elements of the web page, and these are called as web elements. For example, let's go to our ebay.in. So on this website, say you want to search for JBL speakers. And what do you do when you want to search for this? You would identify the search box and you will enter the text JBL speakers, right? And then you go ahead and click on the search button. So this is the set of operations which you will do. Now for us to write this, and this is exactly what you need to do through your commands. For us to really write this text as JBL speakers, I need to know what this particular element is. Okay, so this particular input box is my web element which I need to identify. Similarly, if I want to click on the search button, I need to identify what this button is. And that's exactly is done by using driver.findElement. Selenium has multiple ways of finding these elements. It has 8 element locating techniques. And our future videos on Selenium do cover these 8 element locating techniques very much in detail. So for us, right now we will be using couple of them. So one is with ID and one is with a link text. The next one, the send keys. So as the name indicates, it is used to send a certain text to any web element you have identified or you want to work with. Like in this example, as I said, since we want to search for JBL speakers, right? I would be basically sending the text JBL speakers to this web element using send keys. Click. So after entering the text, what we need to do, I said, we need to click on the search button. So for all such actions, we have methods defined in Selenium. And one of them is this click. What this does is it just clicks on the web element or the button which we want to work with. So now with these basic commands, let's go ahead and start writing our code for our test case. So what is the test case we are going to write today? So this is my use case today. So use case 1, as a user, I want to log into eBay application, search for JBL speakers, and then I want to check the today's deal. So there is something called as the day's deal. We will go and click on that and see what are the deals available. I have another use case here. What says is, from this website, from wherever we are, right, navigate to the Simplilearn website and navigate back to the ebay.in. So this, using this use case 2, what I want to show you is how do we use the navigational commands. And my third use case is, from the ebay.in, I want to print the page title and close the browser. So with this, we are trying to demonstrate at least few commands from each of the categories which we talked about. So I will be using Eclipse for writing our test scripts. And if you want to know how to get started with Selenium, how do we install Selenium, you can refer to our videos on installation of Selenium by Simplilearn. Okay, let me go to my Eclipse. So in Eclipse, what I have done is I have already created a project called Selenium Demo. And in this project, I have gone ahead and created a Java class in which we would be writing our test case. So the Java class which I have created is ebaysearch.java. And also what I have done is, if you look at few import statements here, I have imported all the required Selenium jars here. So if you look here in the referenced libraries, the way after we work with Java here, right? So Java is the prereq for your Eclipse. So you already have the Java libraries available here. So what I need to do is I also need to import the Selenium jar files, and this is the list of Selenium jar files which you will need to work with the Selenium, and this I've already imported for you. Then another thing what I do as following a best practice is, instead of writing all my code under this main function here, what I do is I create methods for each of the use case or the test case which I'm writing. So same thing, I'm going to do that today for all the use cases which we have taken for this demo. Now let's get started. So what is the first thing which we need to do? The first thing what we need to do is you need to declare your WebDriver. So which I've already done here. I've said WebDriver driver. And then I need to launch the browser before even I go into ebay.in and start performing the other testing. Now for me to launch browser, this is one method which I've already written here. So let me walk you through this. So there are multiple steps we need to follow for launching the browser. The first thing is set system property. So let's understand this particular command here, the one which I have highlighted. So this is used to set the property for your Gecko driver. Now, what is a Gecko driver? If you remember, while we are talking of WebDriver architecture, I said for whichever browser you want to work with, you need to tell the WebDriver as which browser is what you're going to test with. And in my case here, I'm going to be using Firefox browser. And also, if you remember, while explaining the architecture, I said every browser has its own driver which you need to download and install. And where is this driver? Let's go ahead and see that on the seleniumhq.org. So let me go to my Chrome browser. I already have a seleniumhq.org website open here. Now on this website, in the download section, if you go down, you can see something called as third-party drivers, binding and plugins. And here you would see a list of all browsers: Gecko driver, Chrome, Opera, Edge, right, and HTML unit, which is headless browser. So all these browsers which Selenium supports listed. And for each of this browser, we have a driver associated with it, which we can download. So if I want a Gecko driver, what I need to do is I need to click on this latest link. This will take me to the latest web driver which is available. So depending on the operating system which you're using, right now I'm using a Mac, so I've already downloaded it. So once you download, you need to place it in a particular directory. Okay, so let's go back to this. And now if you see this path here, what I'm highlighting, this is where I have kept my Gecko driver. So this Gecko driver, what you see is my executable. So if you're using a Windows machine, it will be geckodriver.exe. So this is the driver which we'll be working with. Now coming back to the system.set property. This particular method or this particular command is used to set your driver property. It is a key value pair, and you will need to know which keys depending on which browsers you're working with. Since I'm working on the Firefox browser, the key which I need to set is the WebDriver gecko.driver. If I'm using Chrome, what I simply do is I have a key called Chrome, and then I would set this path to Chrome driver, and this is exactly you need to do. So for you to, even before launch the browser, you need to do this set property. So let me change this back to Gecko. So now we are clear till here. Now what is the next command which we need to, after setting the property, is after setting the property, you have to instantiate the WebDriver, which is done by using this particular command, driver is equal to new Firefox driver. So once you do this, your browser is going to get launched. Then once your browser is launched, what is the next step you do? You would be launching the application on which you want to perform your test. And that is done by using the command which we just saw now, driver.get. Now since I'm going to be working with ebay.in, I have just said driver.get and the URL, fully formed URL. So this particular method is going to help me launch the Firefox browser and also launch the eBay application. Now advantage of using methods like this is you can reuse these methods in every test case which you're going to write, or you can make a common function of this and just call this function in any of your test cases. Now for me to call this method, what am I going to do? I'm going to create an object of this class. Let's do that. Object is equal to new, done, and then I need to call this method obj.launch browser. Good so far? Alright. So now let's get to the first use case. So let's go back to our presentation and see what was our first use case. Our first use case was that we want to launch the eBay application, which we have already done in the launch browser method, and then we want to search for JBL speakers. Now for that, what we will do, let me create a method here. So I will call this method, I'll say public void, say search product. That's my method name. So I have created a method called search product. Now what I need to do is I need to search for JBL speakers. So for that, let me go to my Firefox browser and I need to first identify the search box element. So for identifying what I do, I go to this website, I go to this element, and then I say inspect element. So now I know that there is already an ID which is unique to this particular web element available. So I'm going to make use of this ID. I need to go to my Eclipse. So now here I'm going to use the find element method. So for that I'll say driver.findElement, I'll say by.id, and it's a string argument. I'll just copy the ID which I copied from the Firefox browser. And then what is the operation I need to do here? I need to send keys. And what is the keys I need to send? The product which I'm searching for. I'm searching for, say, JBL speakers. Done. So with this command, what it will do is it will enter the text JBL speakers in the search box. After doing this, I need to click on the search button. Now similarly, I need to identify what is the web element search. For this, again, I already have a unique ID here, which I'm just going to simply copy from here and use it in the find elements. So same thing I will do, driver.findElement by.id, and this is the ID of the button, And here, what is my operation? I need to click. Done? Good so far. Now, other thing what we also need to understand here is, so what happens sometimes, depending on the website, some websites are pretty slow even while loading the page and some are pretty fast. Now, for the Selenium to work without having to fail or without having to create exception of not finding the elements, it is good to use certain waits. So why we need to use waits is, say for example, when after entering the JBL speakers and after clicking the button, it's going to take a while for it to search for JBL speakers and give us that web page with the list of JBL speakers. And even before we start doing the first command, like searching, once we load the page, it takes time for the complete page to get loaded. Okay, so Selenium provides a lot of synchronization commands, right? And it's a very big topic on its own, which needs to be used, especially when you're working with any kind of website. Okay, so there is since it's a separate topic, there's a separate video which will help you understand how to use the synchronization. Now, for the demo purpose, we have certain wait commands which can be used, and that is exactly which I'm going to use here. So that is called as thread.sleep. So what this does is, say I'm going to give 2000 here. What this does is, this basically, this script waits for 2 seconds, right, after the previous command is executed, and then it executes your next command, which is our find element. Now this is showing us an exception because it wants us to add a exception here, add throws declaration, which is interrupted exception. Okay, we need to do this. So once we are done, okay, we have done the click. So let's see what is the first use case which we had. Have we covered everything in the first use case? Okay, we said log into eBay, done, search for JBL speakers, and then I want to check on the days deal. Okay, we need to do this also. So for that, again, what we need to do is we need to go and identify. So what I will do, I'll use the inspector here and look for this daily deals. Now this is a link text, it's an anchor tag. So what I will do, I'll copy this link text, daily deals. I'll go to my Eclipse. Now after this, I will give another thread.sleep of say 2 seconds. That should be more than enough. And then I'll say driver.find element. Now this time I will be using something called as link text. And here as an argument, as a parameter, I'm going to paste the daily deals which I just copied. And then what do I need to do on this web element? I just need to do a click operation. Done. So the complete first use case we have covered. So what we will do is, let's go ahead and execute this first use case. Now I have launched the browser here. I also need to call this method, which is search product. Now again here, since we are doing that add throw declaration on the method, we also need to do it for the main function. Exception added. I'll save this, and for me to run this, what I do is I simply right click on that and I say run as Java application. Now we see that our Firefox browser is launched, the eBay application is also launched, and JBL speakers entered and search clicked. So we have a list of JBL speakers here. And now as per our test case, it has to go on the daily deals, which it just did. Great. Alright, so we have our first use case working. So right now I have not used the browser.close. So what I will do is I'll just manually go and close this browser. So we are done with our first use case. Now let's move to our second use case. So what second use case says is, from wherever you are, right now we are on the ebay.in, navigate to Simplilearn website and then navigate back to ebay.in. So let's see how to handle that. So let's go back to my Eclipse here. Now let's create another method. Instead of saying test case 2 or use case 2, we'll give a more meaningful name. I'll say navigate, since we are exercising the navigate commands here. I'll just use this method. Now, so we have done the click. So I need a quick thread.sleep here because I want it to wait so that we can see. Otherwise, it's going to be so fast, we will not be able to see what are the operations it did. So I'll just add a thread.sleep before we start navigating to the new website. Okay, thread.sleep, and I guess 2 seconds should be good enough even here. So same thing, we need to add the exception. So add throws declaration and interrupted exception. All right, done. So now what we need to do is we need to navigate to the simplilearn.com. So for that, first I need a fully formed URL of the website which I want to launch. Okay, so let me go to, and here instead of ebay.in, I would say let's search for Simplilearn. I have it here, and I just pick this from here, https www.simplilearn.com. So let me go to my Eclipse, and here we saw another command like get. We said navigate.to. So let's use the same command. So I'll say driver.navigate .2, and I'm going to use to URL because, or you can just use a string because this is going to be a string variable. Now what does this command do? This will simply navigate to the URL which we have specified here. Now here again I'm going to give a quick sleep here so that we are able to see the website before we navigate back to the ebay.in. So I'll use a thread.sleep. This time probably I'll give a 3-second wait. Then what does our use case say? Let's go back to use case once and check. And it says and navigate back to ebay.in. So that means I need to use a driver.navigate. Can you see the list of commands here which provide which the navigate class provides? Okay, and the back is what we need to use so that it comes back to the ebay.in. Done? So far so good. Now let's do one thing. Before even we go to the use case 3, let's execute our test case till here. So what I'll do, I'll save this program, and after search product I will call navigate method. Okay, I will save this and then right click, run as Java application. So our Firefox is getting launched. It has launched. The eBay application is on. So it's going to first find the JBL speakers, click on the search. We have a list of JBL speakers. Then it will click on the daily deals. Yes, it is doing that. We got the deals of the day. Yes, it is now navigating to Simplilearn.com. Now after 3 seconds, it should take me back to the ebay.in. Okay, cool. So this was the last page where we left before we navigated to Simplilearn, right? And that is where we have come back using the back command. So now let me close this again because I have still not incorporated the driver.close. Now let's look at the use case 3. Now use case 3 says once you're back to ebay.in, print the page title and then close the browser. Cool, very simple. So we'll go back to Eclipse. Probably in the same method, what I can do is once I'm back here, I will say, so I have to use driver.getTitle. That was a spelling mistake. Driver.getTitle. Okay, this is the method which we are going to use to get the title of the page. Now we also said that once we get the page title, we want to print it on the console. Now how do you print it on console? You just use a sysout statement. So instead of just writing this, what I will do is I'll directly write a sysout statement, system.out.println, and I'll write a text as the title of this page is, and then we will concatenate with driver.getTitle. As simple as that. And after I do this, I will simply call, it's actually, I want to call the driver.list, but it's always good to create a separate method. So I'll say public void close browser method. And here I'll simply say driver.quit. You can use close or you can use quit. So let me demonstrate how do we use quit here. Now I need to call the close browser. So simply what I'll do, I'll say obj.close browser method. Okay, so this completes our all 3 use cases. So now let's execute all these 3 use cases now. And we should be able to see the title of this page on the console. So same thing, what I do is right click, run as Java application. Okay, same thing, our eBay is launched now. Send keys the JBL speakers, click on search button, executed, and then it has to click on the daily deals. That it is done. Moves to Simplilearn website. Now it has to come back to ebay.in and we should be able to see the close browser, which just happened at the snap of the finger, right? So now for us to know whether it really happened, what we have done is we have printed the page title. Okay, now can you see here? We have the complete page title printed here. All right, so let's go back. So let's look at what are the key takeaways from that. So in this overall video, we saw what was Selenium, what is Selenium WebDriver, what were the limitation of the remote control, which is Selenium RC, how did WebDriver replaced it, and we went into learning the architecture of the Selenium WebDriver, which is very important for us to understand because we will be working with the WebDriver to create all our automation scripts. And then, as I said, every tool has its own limitation. We also talked about limitations at a very high level and also as there are workarounds. And then I also demoed some of the browser APIs and their usages and some of the methods which we use with Selenium. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video and I hope you all enjoyed watching this video. Do check out our other videos on Selenium WebDriver from Simplilearn. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.